So, welcome back to J Muddy ATV and Outdoors. I am Jeremy Warner, and today what we are doing is we are getting our little Power Wheels racer ready for the downhill Jeep Barbie race at Tall Pines. So, the first step in all this process, I already got it washed, is removing these decals and getting everything ready for paint. So, anyhow, let's hop to it. Alright, so to get the decals off, this one here just came off real easily. This comes off real easily and it peels. And this last part, this doesn't want to come off. Alright, so to get these old decals off, gotta give them a little heat. I'm also trying to do this without ruining the body lines here. But yeah, a little heat, a little razor blade. The old decals on these come off easier than anything else. Alright, so the next step of this process is going to be removing this front windshield, removing the mirrors and the windows along the side, the seat, which it looks like to me there's a bolt here, a bolt here, a bolt here, and a bolt here. And I think those two bolts on the side there are for the mirrors. So, stop talking about it, let's get it done. So what I'm doing right here is I am using a Phillips screwdriver to actually remove the passenger side windshield on the Power Wheels itself. It's really a simple process, just 2 screws and it comes out. This section right here, all I did was I used a flathead screwdriver and everything popped right on out. So it's taking this process a little bit longer than what I thought it would. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's these tabs in here and they're kind of a little difficult to push out. So anyhow, gotta get this done. One thing I want to note here is that I ended up using a pick to finally pry the prongs away from the tabs on the body of the vehicle itself, and that's how I got the plastic glass to lift out of it. Alright, so we got everything stripped out that I need to mask off. So the next step in this whole process, since you see all that garbage down there in that little section there, I'm going to go wash this thing again and I'll be right back. Alright, so today we gotta start removing the gears off this thing. That way, when we're actually racing, we can actually freewheel down the hill. And we'll let the momentum actually let us win the race. So the easiest thing to remove the wheels on here, sometimes they're a little finicky. Yep, this is being a little finicky, but we gotta remove the center wheel cap so we can pop the wheels off. That way, so we can actually pop the motor off. In this situation, I actually need to pop the wheels off in order to paint it anyhow, so I'll be back in a few minutes once I get a little screwdriver to actually pop this wheel cap right off. So it helps to get a pick or a small screwdriver and boom, it just pops right out. Get your little impact with a 14mm socket. Alright, so here's what I figured out. If you actually just take the vice grip and clamp it on the inside on the axle, take your little impact, whiz it off. There you go, you got your wheel removed. And just so we don't lose anything, I'm just gonna place the nut right back on. But seems to me that the motors will actually slide off real easily. But I think the next step in our process, because there's actually 4 wires going back to the motor, there's some quick little disconnects here. So once we figure out how we're going to remove those, we'll be right back. Alright, so plan B, since my soldering iron right now isn't really working the way I want it to, I already disconnected the battery, so I'll just cut these wires here. Then I'll remove this nut, slide that motor out. Slide that motor out. Alright, so our only issue is now is that we don't really have a spacer to actually fix our wheel from actually sliding in and out or coming off. So the next step in the process would be to take this apart here and see if we can actually remove one of the gears so this machine can actually freewheel when it's going downhill while we're racing. I mean, if you're going to build it yourself, I just recommend removing these 2 top screws, slide the motor out, and you're pretty much all set. So anyhow, I'm going to get the rest of this disassembled, get my hands cleaned up, and we'll be right back with the next process of painting this whole thing. Alright, so we're just going to slide, now that we got everything taken apart. In fact, why this bolt is here, but we'll fix that in a few minutes. Alright, so now that we got those screws shoved out of there, make sure when you're shoving your spacer back that you actually put the narrow end facing towards the transmission. And then after that, downhill scramble run number 2. I put it down here because that actually shoots down here pretty fast, even though that's just a slightly graded hill. Alright, so before I start scuffing it up with paint, all the decals that we removed yesterday, we gotta remove all the excess residue from those decals before we start scuffing it up. So I got some acetone here, my scraper from yesterday. So let's get started. Alright, so the next step of this process is you want to scuff up every little spot on this thing if you're going to paint it, which on these it really doesn't take much to actually scuff everything up, as long as you go in a circular pattern. It'll leave everything nice and even. And it'll make it so this coat, so your primer coat actually sticks to the substrate. Alright, so now that our little rain delay is over with, it's time to actually wipe this down, at least get it primed, and then we'll let it sit a few hours before we finally put our color coat on. So what we got to do first is take our little paint thinner here. In fact, make sure I got 2 rags here. But with our paint thinner, we're going to wipe everything down to make sure our paint actually sticks to the plastic. Alright, so now we are officially done putting the primer coat on. We got 2 coats of primer on it. And as you can see, everything on this turned out pretty well. Alright, so before we begin painting, what I'm using is Krylon Fusion all-in-one paint and primer, and that's for the rims. I want the rims to actually be black on this racer here. So I chose this because it works really well with plastics, and I've used it before with plastics. And the primer I used before was another Krylon product. So anyhow, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to be using Krylon Fusion. It's another paint and primer. The only reason why I put a primer on this, it's because everyone's going to be mainly staring at the body of the vehicle. And the primer helps fill in a few places. So we're going to use Matte Fire Red, which you'll actually figure out that it's pretty much the same color as the four-wheeler. So that's why I went with this color. We're going to call this little thing Little Red. So Little Red is actually going to look nice and shiny when we're done. Alright, so paint wise, it looks alright on 3/4 of it. I gotta fix this spot here, and then try to zoom in on it, but right about here I kind of have like a little run and cracking, so when this thing dries I gotta fix that spot and that spot. So that's gonna delay this video in a few spots, but it is what it is. So anyhow, stay tuned. Alright, so what happened was we got a little bit of the runs with the paint. So I gave it a little bit of I did a little bit of sanding to try to reduce some of the runs. So what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to repaint over this, and then we're finally going to put our clear coat on. So anyhow, let's hop to it. Alright, so I fixed the issues, I got it repainted. I waited about 20 minutes to a half an hour so I could finally put my clear coat on, but I also got to remove the masking. So why don't we do that? So it's a few days later, and we have pretty much everything painted except for these silver caps here in the front grille. But anyhow, let's get this thing reassembled and start making this thing look like a Power Wheel again. Okay, so now that everything's done, it's actually time to show the final product. And I get it, before I kind of said I was going to close out, but I decided not to. I decided to show it instead of showing you the final product on race day. So let's go look at what we got and how it compares to, dang, these bugs are nasty, how it compares to the big red monster. Alright, so what we got here, we're calling this one Little Red, because as you can tell, that's the big red monster. And then you got Little Red. It closely, if you look at both of them, it very closely almost resembles the Wheeler. Because you have black and red rims, and you got the trim piece, black and red rims, along with the fender flares acting as the trim piece. So in a lot of ways it's very similar to the big red monster. Now what I'm using this for is the Barbie Jeep Power Wheels races that they're gonna have at Tall Pines. It's not exactly a Barbie Jeep, but at the same time it'll pass for being one because it is a Power Wheels. It's a 2005 Ford F-150 model. And then right here, the big old girl. She's going to be used for the more challenging things, like the regular drag races. And she is looking good and ready to go. So